Welcome to Lore by Naz. Today we dive deep into the life of Tyrion Lannister, the cleverest mind in Westeros. From his childhood in Casterly Rock to his battles, betrayals, and ultimate role in shaping kingdoms, we explore every moment of Tyrion's journey. Sit back, relax, and let the story of the Imp unfold as we uncover the full lore of one of Game of Thrones' most complex characters. Chapter 1: Birth and Childhood at Casterly Rock. Tyrion Lannister was born under the shadow of tragedy in the year 273 AC, in the ancient towering fortress of Casterly Rock. The castle itself seemed to sense the sorrow, with its stone walls echoing the cries of the newborn and mourning of the lost mother. Lady Joanna Lannister died giving birth to her youngest son, leaving the infant with a father who could never forgive him for her death. Tywin Lannister, a man of iron and ambition, looked down at Tyrion not with affection, but with contempt, seeing in the child the embodiment of loss, weakness, and failure. Even as a baby, Tyrion's small, twisted frame marked him as different. His legs were malformed, his arms slightly shorter than normal, and his face, though handsome in its own right, carried features that were exaggerated by the cruel standards of his house. In the gilded halls of Casterly Rock, where the laughter of Jaime and Cersei echoed through corridors, Tyrion's cries were often ignored or met with cold disapproval. Yet the castle had its own lessons to teach. Tyrion quickly learned that survival required intelligence. If he could not match others in strength, he would surpass them in mind. He began observing the court, watching how words and actions swayed lords and ladies, how subtle gestures could command respect or instill fear. Even the smallest comment, timed correctly, could shift a conversation. Tyrion would later call these early lessons the foundation of his power, knowledge and wit as armor. Jaime, his elder brother, was his first protector and mentor. Though proud, reckless, and often preoccupied with glory, Jaime occasionally saw the spark in Tyrion, a mind quick, clever, and capable of seeing the unseen. Cersei, however, resented him deeply. Every flaw Tyrion carried, she magnified. Every misstep he made, she mocked. Even in these formative years, Tyrion understood that he would have to fight not with swords, but with his mind and his humor. Books became his refuge. He devoured the histories of Westeros, the tales of dragons and Targaryens, the strategies of past kings and generals. He read of heroes and villains, of knights and kings, of laws and treaties, and absorbed them as though the knowledge itself were a shield. Night after night, Tyrion sat alone in candlelit corridors, the cold stone walls around him silent witnesses to his growing intellect. He memorized names, events, and strategies, pondering how a small man might change the world without stepping into a battlefield. In these solitary hours, Tyrion also discovered humor. Even in ridicule, he learned to laugh at himself before others could, deflecting cruelty with wit. It became a survival mechanism, but also a weapon. A sharp tongue, he realized, could pierce more deeply than any blade. By the age of 10, Tyrion could negotiate, argue, and manipulate with a skill that many lords lacked. He was learning the most important lesson of all. In a world that despised him, he must rely on his mind to survive, thrive, and eventually influence kingdoms. Though his childhood was marked by scorn and sorrow, Tyrion's spirit was resilient. He learned empathy by watching those around him, seeing both the cruelty and kindness in people. He began to understand the delicate balance of human nature, that power was as much about perception as reality, and that the clever often survived where the strong perished. In the quiet of Casterly Rock, the boy who would one day be called the Imp began his journey, his mind sharpening like a hidden blade, ready to shape his destiny in ways no one expected. Chapter 2: The Tragedy of Tyshain. Tyrion's youth, he encountered a rare spark of warmth and affection. Tysha. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. A woman who did not see the dwarf, the deformity, or the name he had been cursed with. Instead, she saw Tyrion, the boy who longed for love, acceptance, and the simple comfort of being cherished. Their meeting was unremarkable at first. A passing smile exchanged, a word spoken in jest. Yet, in a world where Tyrion was often dismissed or mocked, Tysha's attention felt monumental. She laughed at his wit, listened to his stories, and offered a tenderness that he had never experienced in his family's cold halls. For the first time, Tyrion believed himself worthy. "I love you, Tyrion," she whispered one evening, her voice soft and certain, as they walked along the cliffs overlooking the sea. Tyrion, heart-pounding, dared to believe it. He had never been called worthy. He had never been seen as more than a dwarf, a joke, a burden. And yet here was Tysha, offering him the impossible, love without conditions, without judgment. They married in secret, a union born of genuine affection and hope. For a fleeting period, Tyrion felt a freedom he had never known. The walls of his childhood fears seemed to fade, replaced by laughter, warmth, and the thrilling certainty that someone somewhere valued him for who he was. But Westeros is rarely kind to joy. Tywin discovered the secret marriage, and his wrath was swift, cruel, and calculated. Tyrion's father devised a punishment that would shatter both body and spirit. Tysha, he claimed, had been nothing but a hired woman, a jest at Tyrion's expense. And Tyrion, in an act orchestrated to humiliate him, was forced to participate in her degradation. The memory would haunt him for years. Tyrion recalled the cold stone floor, the mocking laughter, and the disbelief that any man could endure such orchestrated cruelty. Every piece of hope, every moment of innocence was stripped away, leaving behind only anger, sorrow, and the cold understanding that life in Westeros demanded cunning above all else. "I will never forget this," he whispered to the empty night, tears mingling with rage. "And yet I will endure. I will survive. I will use this." In the aftermath, Tyrion retreated into his mind as he had during childhood, fortifying himself with knowledge, humor, and strategic thought. He learned early that happiness could be fleeting, that trust could be weaponized, and that the world was full of those who sought to exploit weakness. But even in this pain, he grew. Tyrion realized that intelligence, wit, and observation could become armor against cruelty. He honed his ability to read people, to anticipate their motives, and to navigate dangers invisible to the unobservant. He understood that he might never command armies with strength, nor impress kings with beauty, but his mind could wield power in ways others could never comprehend. Tysha's betrayal, orchestrated by Tywin, became the crucible in which Tyrion's character was tempered. He emerged not embittered in spirit, but sharper, aware that the greatest threats often came from those closest to him, and that survival required constant vigilance, quick thinking, and an unyielding sense of self. Years later, Tyrion would reflect upon Tysha, remembering the fleeting warmth, the joy, and the lessons of betrayal. Her presence, brief though it was, had awakened in him the desire for love and the understanding that life's cruelty could be endured if one relied on wit, courage, and careful observation. He had survived. He had learned. And in those lessons, he began to carve the path that would eventually lead him to influence, power, and a legacy far beyond the reach of his father's cruelty. Chapter 3. Winterfell and the Wall. After the treacherous events of his youth, Tyrion journeyed north with King Robert Baratheon's court, traveling through the cold, rugged terrain of the north. Winterfell, the ancestral seat of House Stark, rose like a sentinel against the horizon, its stone walls weathered by time and harsh winds. For Tyrion, the journey was more than a physical passage. It was an opportunity to observe, to learn, and to measure himself against the vast tapestry of Westeros. At Winterfell, Tyrion met Jon Snow, a young man cast as an outsider, much like himself. Jon bore the mark of illegitimacy, the silent scorn of society, and the quiet weight of expectation. Tyrion saw in him a reflection of his own struggle. He approached Jon with a mixture of humor and wisdom, leaning casually against a stone wall as the wind whipped through the courtyard. "You know," Tyrion said softly, "sometimes the world judges a man for what he is, rather than what he can do. Learn to wear your shame like armor, and it can never be used to wound you." Jon looked at him, uncertain, but there was a spark of understanding in his eyes. Tyrion smiled faintly, recognizing that this was a rare moment, a chance to pass on a lesson born from a lifetime of pain, humiliation, and cunning. Tyrion spent days observing the Stark household. He watched the stoic Ned Stark, a man whose honor was absolute, and Catelyn, whose vigilance and love for her family were both a shield and a sword. He noted the careful dynamics of power, loyalty, and influence within the family. Every conversation, every gesture seemed calculated, yet infused with emotion. Tyrion's mind thrived in this environment, cataloging every detail, every subtle signal of intent or vulnerability. From Winterfell, Tyrion ventured further north to the Wall, home of the Night's Watch. The Wall was immense, a towering barrier of ice and stone that stretched beyond sight. Here, the world became harsher, the cold more biting and the stakes more severe. He observed the brothers of the Night's Watch, men who had sacrificed family, name, and comfort to guard the realm against dangers unseen. Tyrion, small and unarmored, understood that survival required more than courage. It required patience, observation, and the ability to anticipate threats before they materialized. He spent hours speaking with the men stationed there, listening to their stories of battles against wildlings, of the horrors beyond the Wall, and of the discipline required to endure. He asked questions not to challenge but to learn. Even in exile from his homeland, Tyrion's mind remained active, ever analyzing, ever planning. One night, beneath the pale glow of the moon reflecting off the icy ramparts, Tyrion reflected upon his own life. "I am small," he whispered to the silent wind, "yet I endure. I am despised, yet I survive. The world underestimates me, and that is my advantage." These northern journeys deepened Tyrion's understanding of human nature. He learned that courage alone was not enough to navigate the complexities of life. Intelligence, foresight, and subtlety often mattered far more. From Jon Snow, he observed quiet strength. From the Night's Watch, he learned endurance. From Winterfell itself, he learned the balance of loyalty and pragmatism. Though the North was cold, harsh, and often unforgiving, it shaped Tyrion's mind like a whetstone sharpens a blade. Every observation, every conversation, every moment of reflection became a tool he would later use to navigate the dangerous courts of kings, the treacheries of his own family, and the complexities of power itself. In the frozen North, Tyrion Lannister honed a skill more potent than any sword: the ability to read people, understand motives, and manipulate outcomes without revealing his hand. As he departed the Wall, leaving its towering ice and solemn men behind, Tyrion carried with him lessons that would resonate through the rest of his life. The North had taught him that strength is not always physical, that the clever can survive where the strong perish, and that even a man who seems powerless can wield influence with wisdom, patience, and observation. Chapter 4. Capture by Catelyn Stark and the Trial at the Eyrie. Expanded. On the road south from the Wall, Tyrion's journey took an unexpected and perilous turn. He was seized by Catelyn Stark, a woman of formidable will and deep suspicion, accused of a crime he did not commit, the attempted murder of her son, Bran. Tyrion, small, sharp, and ever vigilant, understood immediately that he faced mortal danger. Captured, bound, and transported to the Eyrie, he confronted not only his physical limitations but the stark realities of Westerosi justice, a system where perception often outweighed truth, and accusations could lead to death. The Eyrie rose high atop its mountain, a fortress of impossibility. Its walls seemed to scrape the clouds, and the sky stretched endlessly beyond, a reminder of Tyrion's confinement. Catelyn had delivered him here with an unspoken promise of retribution. But Tyrion, never one to despair, immediately began calculating his survival. Lysa Arryn, the Lady of the Eyrie, ruled with a mixture of fear, superstition, and overprotectiveness. Her court was small, her judgment swift, and her temper volatile. Tyrion was placed before her, accused, ridiculed, and expected to suffer. Yet in the midst of mockery and condemnation, he found his opportunity. His mind, honed from years of scorn and observation, devised a solution where brute force would fail: trial by combat. "Then let there be a champion," Tyrion said with calm, deliberate precision, his voice carrying through the cold chamber. "Let my fate be decided by skill, not by rumor." The arrangement was unusual, yet allowed by the laws of the Seven Kingdoms. Tyrion chose a man of uncertain allegiance but remarkable skill: Bronn. Though a sellsword of humble origins, Bronn had the strength, cunning, and fearlessness that Tyrion lacked. The trial, a spectacle of tension and anticipation, ended with Tyrion's victory. Bronn defeated Lysa's champion, and Tyrion walked free. This moment reinforced lessons Tyrion had known for years. Survival in Westeros required intellect, careful observation, and the ability to manipulate perception. Even when imprisoned and facing death, a clever mind could carve a path to life where others saw only despair. In the quiet moments after his release, Tyrion reflected on the events. The world, he thought, will always try to bind me with chains I cannot break with my body. But my mind is mine. My mind is free, and it will keep me alive. Tyrion's capture and subsequent release were more than a narrow escape. They were a masterclass in strategy, manipulation, and self-preservation. He observed how fear could be weaponized, how superstition could be turned to advantage, and how loyalty, even in uncertain allies, could be leveraged with careful judgment. Each step, each decision was calculated, ensuring that he not only survived, but also learned lessons that would serve him throughout his life. Even as he left the Eyrie behind, Tyrion carried with him a profound understanding of human nature. Power was not always held in armies or gold. It often resided in perception, wit, and the ability to act decisively when others hesitated. He had faced death, manipulated outcomes, and emerged unscathed, further sharpening the mind that would one day allow him to shape kingdoms, navigate treacherous courts, and survive betrayals that would have broken others. Tyrion Lannister, the dwarf scorned by birth and mocked by fate, had proven once more that cunning, observation, and intelligence could turn even the direst circumstances to advantage. The lessons of the Eyrie were etched into his mind, a reminder that survival in Westeros was never about strength alone. It was about the careful, deliberate use of the mind, even when the body was weak and the world was against you. Chapter 5. Acting Hand of the King during the War of the Five Kings. Tywin Lannister appointed Tyrion as acting hand of the king in King's Landing. It was a position fraught with danger not only from the external threat of Stannis Baratheon's army, but from the insidious politics within the Red Keep. Tyrion, small in stature but vast in intellect, embraced the role with cautious determination. He understood that every decision, every word, and every alliance could mean the difference between life and death. Not only for himself, but for the city he now commanded. King's Landing was a city teetering on chaos. Fear and rumor filled the streets, whispers of rebellion reached even the highest towers, and the common folk were prone to panic at the slightest provocation. Tyrion walked the city as though it were a chessboard, observing every move, every pawn, and calculating the outcome. He met with the Master of Coin, discussing finances and resources, and considered the best ways to supply the city for the coming siege. He observed the nobles, noting their ambitions, alliances, and weaknesses, and prepared to use them as pieces on the board. Despite his small stature, Tyrion's presence commanded attention. He had learned that perception often outweighed power. A clever remark, delivered with confidence, could earn the respect of the proudest lord or disarm the most dangerous conspirator. He walked the halls of the Red Keep with the calm assurance of a man who had faced death before and survived. His advisors and the King's Council initially doubted him, mocking the dwarf who dared take command. Yet Tyrion turned their skepticism into opportunity. He listened more than he spoke, observing weaknesses, predicting reactions, and shaping the Council's decisions through subtle guidance. In every word he uttered, there was thought, precision, and intent. Tyrion understood the true challenge was not merely defending the city, but ensuring the loyalty of those within it. Bribes, promises, and calculated threats were tools in his arsenal, wielded with a deft hand. He prepared the city's defenses, reinforcing the walls, stockpiling weapons, and ensuring that the men under his command were ready for the trials to come. He also navigated the treacherous waters of court intrigue. Nobles, jealous of his position and resentful of his birth, plotted against him. Tyrion met every subtle threat with calm observation and clever manipulation, often turning the schemes of his enemies into opportunities to strengthen his influence. He understood that in King's Landing, survival depended on mental agility, social intelligence, and the ability to act before danger struck. In quiet moments, Tyrion reflected on his responsibilities. I am small, he thought, yet I hold the city in my hands. I am scorned, yet I command loyalty. They mock me, but they follow my counsel. The world sees weakness where I see strength. His time as acting hand of the king solidified Tyrion's reputation as a man whose mind was a weapon. He understood that leadership was not merely about issuing commands or displaying authority. It was about seeing all angles, anticipating the moves of others, and guiding outcomes without overt force. Tyrion had become a master strategist, not through brute strength, but through intellect, observation, and the ability to turn adversity into advantage. Even in the face of impending siege and potential betrayal, Tyrion remained calm. Every choice he made, every decision he executed, was guided by foresight, prudence, and the sharp edge of his mind. In these days of tension and uncertainty, the small man who had once been ridiculed in the halls of Casterly Rock proved that intellect, courage, and cunning could command cities, influence kings, and withstand the harshest trials. Tyrion Lannister, the imp, had transformed from a figure of scorn to a force of calculated authority, ready to face challenges that would test not only his mind, but his spirit and resilience. Chapter 6. The Battle of Blackwater. The city of King's Landing stood on the precipice of disaster. Stannis Baratheon, claiming the Iron Throne, had arrived with his army, and the threat of siege loomed over every citizen. Tyrion Lannister, acting hand of the king, understood that this would be the ultimate test of his intellect, courage, and leadership. The fate of the city and his own life depended on his actions. From the Red Keep, Tyrion observed the burning horizon as Stannis' fleet approached. Ships glimmered in the sunlight, their banners snapping in the wind, and the sound of distant horns carried over the water. The people of King's Landing were frightened, unsure if the walls would hold or if the city would be consumed by flames. Tyrion did not falter. He had prepared for this moment long before the first horn sounded. Wildfire, a volatile substance of terrible power, had been carefully placed along the waters near the harbor. It was a dangerous gamble, one that could destroy friend and foe alike if mismanaged. But Tyrion had calculated every risk, accounting for wind, tide, and the enemy's maneuvers. Fire and water, he muttered to himself, a faint smile on his lips. A king's army will drown in flames and the clever will survive. When Stannis' fleet entered the bay, Tyrion's trap was sprung. Green flames erupted across the water, consuming ships in a terrifying blaze. Screams and shouts filled the air as men were incinerated or thrown into the sea. The city was momentarily safe, held at bay by Tyrion's ingenuity. But Tyrion's role was not complete. Recognizing that fear could spread even among defenders, he took to the battlefield himself. Mounted on a horse, armor shining faintly in the flickering light, Tyrion led the men defending the gates. Though his size limited him, his presence inspired courage. He shouted orders, rallied soldiers, and struck down foes when necessary, proving that valor need not be measured in height or strength alone. Yet even in victory, Tyrion's heart carried sorrow. Many of his men fell, and despite his brilliance, Tywin Lannister claimed the glory for himself. Tyrion's deeds, though crucial to the city's survival, were overshadowed by his father's ambition and the ever-present scorn for his stature. He had risked life and limb to save King's Landing, and yet the world remained unjust, a lesson Tyrion had learned long ago. Amid the chaos, Tyrion reflected on the paradox of power and recognition. I hold the city in my hands, he thought, wiping soot from his face. And yet I remain invisible. They see only the dwarf, never the man who guided them through fire and blood. The Battle of Blackwater was a turning point, not only for King's Landing but for Tyrion's understanding of himself. He realized that true strength was not in glory but in survival, strategy, and foresight. Victory could be achieved with cleverness, courage, and audacity, even when the world seemed stacked against him. As the fires died down and the surviving soldiers tended to the wounded, Tyrion's mind was already moving forward. He understood that the war was far from over, and that his position, though influential, remained precarious. Every ally could become a foe, Every friend could betray, and every decision carried consequences far beyond his control. Yet Tyrion Lannister, the dwarf once scorned, the man mocked and underestimated, had proven that intellect, courage, and careful calculation could triumph where swords alone might fail. The Battle of Blackwater was a testament not only to his strategic genius, but to the enduring resilience and indomitable spirit that would carry him through the darkest trials of his life. In the quiet after the battle, as the smoke drifted over the city and the cries of the wounded faded, Tyrion reflected quietly. The clever survive, the brave endure, and the world, cruel as it may be, can be turned to your advantage if your mind is sharper than the rest. Chapter 7. Shae, Betrayal, and Trial Amid. The chaos of King's Landing and the burdens of leadership, Tyrion found a rare solace in Shae. She was clever, lively, and unafraid to speak her mind, qualities Tyrion both admired and needed. In her presence he could laugh, joke, and forget, if only briefly, the weight of his family's disdain and the dangers that surrounded him. Shae offered him companionship unlike any he had known. She saw the man beneath the dwarf, the intellect and wit beneath the mocking exterior. Their relationship was complicated, filled with passion, humor, and whispered moments in shadowed halls, yet it brought Tyrion a fleeting sense of peace. He allowed himself to hope, to believe that perhaps even a man like him could experience love and loyalty. But Westeros is rarely kind to such happiness. When King Joffrey was poisoned, Tyrion was accused of the crime. The trial that followed was not merely judicial, it was spectacle, humiliation, and theater. He was brought before the court, ridiculed, and subjected to the sneers and jeers of nobles who sought to see him broken. His wit, so often a shield, offered little protection against the tidal wave of accusation. And then came the betrayal that cut deepest. Shae testified against him. She claimed deceit, painting Tyrion as a murderer and liar. Tyrion's heart, already battered by years of scorn and misfortune, cracked under the weight of this betrayal. The woman he trusted, the one who had shown him care and affection, had turned against him, whether under duress, fear, or her own ambition. "I trusted you," he whispered quietly in the dark of his cell, his voice barely audible. And yet even love can betray. Even loyalty can lie. The trial revealed the stark truth of Westeros, that loyalty is fragile, truth is malleable, and justice is often a tool wielded by the powerful. Tyrion, though shamed and trapped by circumstance, refused to surrender completely. He understood that survival depended on intellect and composure. Words, carefully chosen and delivered with precision, could still influence outcomes even when the odds seemed insurmountable. During the trial, Tyrion's sharp mind did not falter. He questioned witnesses, analyzed motivations, and observed reactions. He realized that the court was as much a game of perception as it was of fact. Each accusation, each glance, and each lie was a move in a larger game, a game he had been forced to play since birth. The betrayal of Shae remained the deepest wound. He thought back to the nights they spent together, the warmth of her presence, the rare moments of laughter. And now those memories were twisted, filled with pain, uncertainty, and anger. Tyrion's mind churned, balancing grief with strategy, as he planned his next steps even in the midst of despair. The trial's conclusion did not bring relief. Tyrion was found guilty, sentenced to death, and the world closed in around him like a tightening noose. And yet, even in the face of imminent doom, Tyrion's mind remained unbroken. He understood that escape, survival, and even justice could be achieved with cunning, courage, and careful calculation. It was Varys the Spider and his brother Jaime who orchestrated the means of escape. Tyrion would flee the Red Keep, leaving behind the courtroom that had mocked him, the king who had condemned him, and the woman who had betrayed him. Yet even in flight, his thoughts were not of revenge alone. They were of reflection, strategy, and the understanding that survival in a world of deceit required patience, intellect, and moral pragmatism. Shae's betrayal, though bitter, became another lesson in Tyrion's lifelong education. He learned that even love could be weaponized, that trust was a fragile and dangerous thing, and that wisdom often required detachment from sentiment. Tyrion Lannister, the man who had endured childhood scorn, exile from affection, and the cruelty of Westeros, now understood that survival demanded a mind sharper than any blade, and a heart capable of enduring the deepest wounds without breaking. As he prepared to flee into the night, Tyrion reflected quietly, eyes fixed on the moonlit sky. The world will betray. Winds may turn. Even love can wound. But I endure. I survive. And in surviving, I will shape the destiny that the cruel hand of fate seeks to deny me.